Good afternoon, everyone. Bang the gavel. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for this council meeting. I'll start with the territorial acknowledgement. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather, land on which we are broadcasting from today, is the land traditionally cared for by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. So a moment of reflection. I have a couple of things here. Just in general about our City of Waterloo Council meetings. At the beginning of this council meeting, we pause to think about the needs of our community. May we show wisdom and compassion in all our decisions. So I have two council statements. One is for Eid al-Fitr. Eid Mubarak to all who celebrate. On April 21st, Muslims around the world came together to celebrate Eid al-Fitr, marking the end of the holy month of Ramadan. Members of the local Muslim community came together in the City of Waterloo space to celebrate Eid al-Fitr on April 21st. And we look forward to continuing this tradition with our Muslim colleagues, family, friends, and neighbors. And personally just extend a thank you to the various groups who invited council members to their community iftars and other events over the holy month of Ramadan. Really appreciated the opportunity to break bread and learn more about that faith tradition. So a council statement now on Mental Health Week. The first week of May has been recognized as Mental Health Week for more than 70 years. The Canadian Mental Health Association has led these efforts to bring awareness to mental health, challenge societal beliefs, and reduce stigma. We each feel the effects of mental health differently. Together, we are learning more about how the many aspects of our identity, including race, ability, class, and age, have an impact on our experiences and therefore our mental health. Historical and ongoing impacts of oppression and trauma have a significant cumulative effect on mental health and well-being. We must ensure that supports and treatment that take into account the different aspects of identity and acknowledge the harmful effects of discrimination and inequities. While there is still much work to be done, it is important to acknowledge the work of the many people in our community who work hard to provide compassionate, culturally relevant, and trauma-informed mental health services. Today, we acknowledge Camino Wellbeing and Mental Health, a newly formed organization that unites existing services to better serve our community. As Mental Health Week approaches, let's commit to create a community that prioritizes good mental health for all by stamping out all forms of oppression and ensuring that people have access to the supports and services they need. So next on the agenda is a disclosure of pecuniary interest and the nature thereof. I myself will disclose that for the the special levy items, I live in Glasgow Heights 2, so I will like that pulled from the consent agenda, and I will leave the room when that is being voted on. So approval of the minutes. So there's a motion that the previous meeting minutes be approved. Is there a mover, Councillor Wright, and a seconder, Councillor Roach? All in favor? That is carried unanimously. So then the consent motion, I will hand this chair over to Councillor Roach. No? Sorry.
Point of order, Mayor, you just pulled the item that you were in conflict out, so
Oh, sorry, we can approve the consent, yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
everything else but E.
I am still learning. Okay, so with that, with the Glasgow Heights 2 special levy pulled out, I would like a motion to approve The consent agenda, moved by Councillor Hamner, seconded by Councillor Rowe. That is all in favor. That is carried. So then now I will hand it over to Councillor Roach. Sorry, their names are too. And
So number E, 2023 GIIHA Special Service Levy, report number Corp 2023-010, prepared by Mary Zubert. The recommendation is that Council approve the staff report, that Council approve the Glasgow 2 Home Association 2023 municipal budget levy of $24,000 to fund the operating and capital costs of the GIIHA recreation facility and programs, and that Council adopt the bylaw attached as Appendix A to this report for the imposition of a special services levy on the rateable properties prescribed therein. Can I have a mover? Councillor Wright, and a seconder, Councillor Rowe. All in favor? Carried.
Seven, the staff reports. 2020 Community Greenhouse Gas Inventory. We have staff member Anna Ristic here, and the report's prepared by Anna, and we have a presentation from Kyra Chisholm, Plan Manager, Climate Action, Waterloo Region. So welcome to you both. And go ahead whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to welcome Kyra Chisholm on behalf of the city. She is our colleague at Climate Action Waterloo Region and the delegate presenting on our Progress, Our Path, the 2019 to 2020 Greenhouse Gas Reinventory Report.
Sorry. We just couldn't quite.
I didn't want to move it up because she's speaking out.
Okay, we just couldn't quite catch that.
No worries. I just wanted to welcome Kyra Chisholm as our colleague from Climate Action Waterloo Region, and our delegate today presenting our Progress, Our Path, our Community Greenhouse Gas Reinventory Report.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you for having us here today. Really happy to be here. As Anna mentioned, my name is Kyra. I'm the Plan Manager with Climate Action Waterloo Region, and joining me today is also Tova Davidson, the Executive Director of Sustainable Waterloo Region, and Mary Jane Patterson, the Executive Director of REAP Green Solutions. Okay, so a little bit about who we are. Climate Action Waterloo Region is a collaboration between local organizations, municipalities, and community members focused on climate change mitigation. We are co-led by both REAP Green Solutions and Sustainable Waterloo Region as a collaborative partnership funded by the region and the 3 cities, and working collaboratively with all 8 municipalities. At a high level, we coordinate the activities of our climate action plans and strategies locally, measure and monitor progress towards our emissions reductions targets, and engage the community broadly in climate action initiatives. So what brings us here today? Back in 2013, we did the first community GHG inventory, and emissions came from 5 sectors: transportation, homes, workplaces, agriculture, and waste. And this led to Waterloo Region's first climate action plan to achieve a 6% GHG emissions reduction between the years 2013 and 2020, based on our 2010 baseline emissions. That's approximately an 842,000 ton reduction over 7 years. So we are here today to close the chapter on our first community climate action plan and report the progress towards our 6% target. So how did we do? In 2017, we released the first iteration of our Progress Our Path and re-inventory using 2015 data. And in this report, we found a 5.2% emissions reduction compared to that 2010 baseline year. We saw an increase in transportation emissions and decreases in both homes and workplaces. The changes we saw were largely attributed to the closure of provincial coal power plants, increase of single vehicle occupancy and passenger vehicle occupancy, and then reduced consumption and increased efficiency leading in the areas of homes and workplaces, leading to reductions. So, due to the abnormal circumstances in 2020 and the drastic effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on our community, we conducted 2 years of inventory. 2020 to account for the end of the 6% target, and 2019 to look at a year that would most closely resemble business as usual. The full report is attached to the staff report and this presentation. So in 2019, we maintained some of the emissions reductions from 2010 baseline at 3.7%, though it is up from the 5.2% reduction in 2015. And in 2020, we see a decrease of 14.4%, more than doubling the emissions reduction target of 6%. 2019 shows us that without the drastic impacts of the pandemic, we would not have been likely to achieve our first greenhouse gas target at 6%. So looking a little bit more closely, we continue to see that transportation of goods and people is the highest emitting sector, followed by workplaces in the ICI sector, and then homes third. And while we did experience an upward trajectory of emissions, we are not growing at the same rate as our population growth, demonstrated in the per capita emissions figure at the top of the chart there. So in 2010, the rate of emissions averaged per person was 8.4 tons of carbon equivalent. In 2015, at 7.5 tons, and despite growth in absolute emissions in 2019, it's at 7.1 tons per person. So we still do have quite far to go as a community. A few key takeaways from our report. Since 2010, I mentioned that transportation emissions remain the largest contributor of emissions and continue to grow despite gains in fuel efficiency. It is essential that we change the way that we move both goods and people in our community. Energy efficiency, fuel switching, and local energy generation provide a significant opportunity for transformational change across all sectors. And finally, there have been many promising initiatives that we're only beginning to see the greenhouse gas reduction benefits of. And so we are encouraged by all the stories that are featured throughout the full report and the many more that we weren't able to capture in the length of the report. So where do we go from here? So we came to you in June 2021 with Transform WR, and all municipalities in Waterloo Region adopted our strategy and a transition towards an equitable, prosperous, resilient, and low-carbon community. This is our community's long-term strategy to reduce emissions 80% by the year 2050, and outlines actions to reduce emissions 50% by the year 2030. And so the results of our 2019 and 2020 re-inventory underscore the importance of transformative climate action and strong collaboration to significantly reduce our emissions as a community. Each municipality has an important role to play in and leads many of the actions in this strategy. In addition, our work at Climate Action continues to be raising awareness that we have this strategy and that it is everyone's role in our community to play in taking climate action. Thank you so much for having us today, and we will be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much, Kira. I really appreciate the presentation and the information in there. And I will turn to council if they have some questions. So starting with Councillor Hamner.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Kira, for being here. This is one of the highlights of the year for me. I always love getting your updates and seeing where we are. And it looks like we are making some progress, which is a good thing. From your perspective, what are as we cast forward and try to hit the 2030 targets, what are the 3 most important things or impactful things we should be doing to make that difference?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think transportation emissions are really a significant target for our community in achieving a 30% emissions reduction. So starting with, we are so happy to see the amount of cycling infrastructure and the micromobility that has come. And so I think some continued education and awareness to community members to take advantage of that wonderful infrastructure and be considering trips under 5 kilometers to be taken by modes of active transportation or public transportation. As well, in the thinking about the ways that we build and operate our spaces that it's in Transform WR, a large opportunity for retrofitting our homes and our buildings that are existing, and then to building new buildings to high efficiency standards. And a third one, oh yes, advocacy. So our plan to, thank you, Tova. Our plan in Transform is 78 actions to achieve a 30% emissions reduction target by 2030. But we have actually all 8 municipalities adopted a 50% target, and that requires coordinated advocacy to provincial and federal levels of government to help us achieve that target.
Great, thank you for that. I think I hear a slogan coming with the last 5K and changing how we look at that last 5K other than the last one. So thank you very much. That's it for me, Mayor.
I like that slogan, Councillor. Can I just ask a quick follow-up to your answer to Councillor Hamner? When you say advocacy to the provincial and federal government, are you talking legislative change and regulatory change? Are you thinking funding? Just wondered if you could be a little bit more specific on that.
Yeah, I think it would be both in funding to help people make retrofits accessible to their homes, as well as sort of the legislative and policy changes, particularly on our energy grid.
Thank you. Councillor Vasic.
Thanks so much for your presentation and everybody's work on this. I think it was in this report. We have something else coming from you, don't we? Yeah, so if it's from you, please, if you could answer instead. I can't now remember which it was. But one of the reports does allude to an increasing population. And I'm just curious if you could speak a little bit more to how much more intense we need to work on these reductions as we get more people, which will contribute more GHG emissions.
Does your report reference that specifically? Yeah, you speak to it. Thanks.
Thank you. Through the mayor to the councillor. That's a fantastic question. One thing that I do want to note when we consider future population growth is the opportunity that we have to not cement high GHG decisions in place, especially when it comes to new residents, when it comes to new housing, and when it comes to especially the edges of the city where we're developing. So in essence, when you build an old building or something like that, it's locked for 30 to 50 years. So that planning element becomes so much more important when you know you're about to have such a intense population growth in the future. That wasn't in my report, but
there was it was a question I had, and then I saw it come up somewhere. So I think it might have been in the climate action report, but it might have just been a line or two. So thank you. Yeah, thanks for that. I was also thinking about, because it really stuck out to me, the piece about transportation being one of the greatest culprits. And so I thought, oh gosh, transportation is one of the greatest culprits. We have an increasing population. What's that going to mean for our GHG emissions? And then I guess this isn't, if you want to comment on this, but I just wanted to give a couple of key things that jump out to me around transportation. One, as a counselor, is just the public pushback. And so how do we also enable counselors and elected officials across the region to be making the decisions that we need to be making for our GHG emissions when we get so much public pushback about cycling infrastructure and things like that. So that I would just say that's a point of feedback for, I think we could just use some help and support. And the other thought I had, this is very granular, but one of the things I struggle with most across the board, and I suspect my colleagues do as well, is school pickup and drop-offs. It's a huge issue across the region, and I think there are things we can do to encourage people through the public infrastructure for sure. But people are also feeling just the pressure of living life right now. And it feels like more than before. I don't know if that's true, but it feels like that. We have so many increasing pressures. So I don't know what we can do there, but I don't know how much it would help with GHG emission reductions, but maybe if it would at all, it might be an area, like a very operational area to look at. And it's just not something I've seen in here, but it's an issue I struggle with a lot as a counselor. And yeah, and then I just want to say, like, good job, City of Waterloo, for the buildings, because that was the other piece, right? It was like, but we've made such great strides in the buildings that we've built recently, like the Eastside Library branch and the WMRC, and that's really, really hopeful because we've far exceeded what we've been able to do. So just some thoughts. So good job, City of Waterloo, and thanks for this report and your presentation.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. There's lots of detail in this report. It's really helpful to benchmark where we're at. I just want to ask about two things. One being, I guess maybe the elephant in the room is fuel switching and our dependence on natural gas. And number two, the advocacy point that you mentioned, in terms of where do we go from here. And it seems to me that there's a huge amount of public education that is required in order for us to give up our dependency on natural gas. I mean, we're still seeing stove ranges being offered as great options or amenities in new builds, the ones that are gas powered. And there's plenty of information about the indoor emissions and impacts on health. So I'm just curious whether you or your colleagues might comment on what sorts of strategies might be in the mix and how council could support you on the advocacy portion of that.
I might ask Tova or Mary Jane if they want to speak to this question from the energy perspective. Thanks.
I think one thing that comes to mind for me is that collectively, Kira talked about, forget the coordinated strategy, that we want to think about what would really bring about systems change. And with regard to heating systems in our home and cooking systems, that could be something that comes out of the federal level of government that requires by a certain year that no further systems like that be sold. It's pretty big. It's nothing we've talked about, but it's the kind of systems change that we can't do as well locally, but a higher level of government could, and that would be a big change. That's one that comes to mind for me.
So I think the other piece that we could think about is actually some great learning we've had from our colleague Matthew Day here from Waterloo Region Community Energy, is that our grid needs to be re-supported to allow for this transition and fuel switching that you were asking about. So to have some advocacy for support for that as well. If we were to turn everything into electric vehicles and fully electrified buildings right now, it could be problematic for the grid to happen all at once. So this coordination of how do we make the energy transition and the low carbon transition together to make that happen. And what that would allow for is in industry, for example, where we don't yet have a technology that allows for some of the industrial practices within the commercial sector to be accommodated while still moving towards a lower emissions future. So there is a very synergistic and interrelated system that we need to move together in a transformational way. And it's going to require this collaborative working that we are doing now to do that, as well as with the provincial and federal government.
So just as a follow-up, in the short term, if you were going to pick one advocacy issue that you wanted council to go all in on, do you have something in mind?
We have to do some arm wrestling.
I was going to say, I'm not sure who wants to respond to that, but whoever does, because we're fortunate enough to have all the leaders of our environmental communities and organizations in one room today, so that's fantastic. But whoever's responding, just come up to the mic.
I think that what Mary Jane was alluding to is we would want to not make a unilateral, this is what you should do. We would want to be working as a collaborative to make that decision based on all of the different interrelated and multiple moving pieces. Some of the things that could happen locally would be things like further investment in active transportation on city streets to allow for that low carbon way of moving around. That doesn't necessarily mean we have to go to advocacy. So there are things that council could do without reaching up, and we will take that homework away with us to pick the one thing.
Kira, did you want to add to that, or Mary Jane?
No.
No? Okay. No. Okay, we're Did you have a follow-up question, Councillor?
I'm just going to comment that, considering that we have a 4-year term, and some of these changes, these big systems changes, obviously take a while to get the cards to line up, or the ducks to line up, however you want to phrase that. But it does take time, and so using the relationships, obviously the champions that you have in the community is obviously so important. So just wanted to acknowledge that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rowe.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you very much for this report. It was so comprehensive and very interesting. What I was wondering, and what I found interesting out of the report, were some of the really innovative project ideas, such as the blue roof, I believe it was, and the waste diversion in downtown Kitchener. So I'm just wondering if there are any other projects that you're thinking of or that are in the works that we could consider even on a broader scale. I might get Tova to speak to those as well. Those were both initiatives that were done quite closely with Sustainable Waterloo Region.
Sure. Just quickly on those two, one was with Enviro Stewards on the smart blue roofs, and then the downtown waste pilot as well, which unfortunately the pandemic made incredibly difficult because people were not on patios and eating in restaurants. But when we look at what are the things we can do to go forward, I would actually encourage you to take a look at Transform WR, because there is a whole list in the back of how many total actions, Kira? 76 total actions and ideas of things we think need to happen to get us to that 30% reduction. So it starts like around a page 100 or 95, something like that. There's a whole list there.
It's very handy how you put tabs in there so you can flip to the different sectors too. Did you have a follow-up, Councillor? No. Okay. Other questions from council? Seeing none. Just a question for me. I was wondering about you have agriculture there. Just curious if you're talking about, are most of the carbon emissions coming from the production piece, like the process that's involved, or is it the actual type of food itself, or is it both? Like, is there one that's kind of, if a change were to be made, would be better to start, or what was sort of encompassed in that?
Yes, thank you. So in the reinventory, the methods for calculating the agriculture do come from a carbon equivalency based on the type of livestock or type of agricultural practices, and then the count of livestock or land space, productive land space in the region. And so the transformative changes around local food production, our agricultural emissions make up a very small percentage, and obviously we account for them, but many of the emissions actually would be captured in the transportation sector around the transportation of our food. So that's where we have a lot of progress to make there. But yes, it would be based on the type of farming practices and or livestock owned by the farm.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I just, I was just thinking about what comes from food, and when we think about different individual actions we can take, there's obviously everyone needs food and eats food, and that's just a piece that I think there's more understanding needed around how we can make different choices would have a significant impact there. And just my other question was, or comment, I guess, first was, it was good to see, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding it, that some of the private sector, like some of their particular, I think it was around energy use, was starting to come down. So really good to see that happening. And it sort of felt to me as I read the report that obviously there's more to do on every front and with the municipalities and private sector as well. But as individuals, like there's things starting to happen, although kind of slowly, within particularly the private sector. But it really is incumbent on us as individuals to really think about the choices we make. But yeah, I really appreciated seeing that some progress being made, particularly by the private sector. So well done to everyone working in those areas. So I don't know if council, last chance for any questions or comments. We have a full afternoon of talking and thinking about climate change and sustainability and energy use. So, like I said before, it's interesting to have all of you in the room today and kind of immerse ourselves in it. So, thanks for this report, Kira, and to everyone involved with putting it together, and continue the good work. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So, council, there's a recommendation that I'll need a mover and seconder for, that we receive the CAO 2023-016 summarizing the 2020 Region of Waterloo greenhouse gas inventory as information. Moved by Councillor Bodley and seconded by Councillor Hamner. All in favor? That is unanimously carried. So next on our sustainability and climate change afternoon is the 2023 Sustainability and Climate Change Update Report prepared by Anna Ristic. There is a presentation attached to this, so we will turn this over to you, Anna.
Thank you, Mayor. Can everyone hear me okay? Fantastic. Believe it or not, I am the shortest in my family, so thank you. Welcome, everyone, to the presentation of the 2023 Sustainability and Climate Change Baseline Report. Before I jump into the bulk of this presentation, I wanted to make a quick note about the report itself. This is the first in a series of annual reports summarizing the progress that we've made as a City of Waterloo on our sustainability and climate change portfolio. It is intended as a summary of all the great work we've done and won't replace any other technical, more detailed reports that might come forward. I will be mentioning adaptation and mitigation several times throughout this presentation. Just as a quick refresher, adaptation refers to the actions that we take to manage the impacts of climate change, such as increasing temperatures, whereas mitigation refers to the actions we take to reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that are in the atmosphere. So who is involved in this work? First, of course, we have staff, who I will touch on in the next slide, but we also have so many fantastic community partners, many of whom are here today, and also our wonderful residents who sit on our committees, act as advocates for this work, and start so many great initiatives within their own communities and neighborhoods. When it comes to staff, we have several staff who are involved directly in this work, and they're listed on the slide there. But I also think it's really important to mention that sustainability and climate work is really the responsibility of all staff in one capacity or another. It is no longer something that is subject to one little corner. It is something that affects us all. And I've been really honestly happy to see some of the tremendous projects and initiatives that have come forward. We are, of course, supported by several fantastic teams and committees that are also listed on the slide, and I wanted to specifically highlight the last one there, the Sustainability and Climate Change and Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Working Group. This is a working group that we founded at the end of last year in order to facilitate the inclusion of DEI into our climate change work. And I wanted to highlight this because so many of the impacts of climate change, and not just the impacts of climate change, but even the actions we take to address climate change, impact our residents inequitably. And so it's so important to make sure that our strategies consider all of the DEI principles. We're going to start off with the Corporation of the City of Waterloo and what we have done in the space, and beginning with our mitigation efforts. We have a corporate greenhouse gas mitigation target of 80% by 2050 as compared to 2011 levels, and we have or are about to have two different plans to address this. We have our energy conservation demand management plans, and we have our upcoming corporate climate action plan, which is looking to integrate sustainability and mitigation into all of our city activities. When it comes to corporate monitoring, on the screen you can see our numbers from 2011 and 2018, and these are our corporate greenhouse gas inventory numbers. and there has been a reduction of 1,882 tons of CO2 equivalent, and CO2 equivalent is the metric that we use to compare different greenhouse gases, the baseline metric. One caveat on this represents about a 30% reduction in our corporate greenhouse gas emissions, but one really important thing to note is that a large percentage of the reduction comes from reductions in the provincial energy grid, which are subject to change. It does highlight something for next year, which is the important need to look at different metrics and to work with our other divisions in the city to look at different metrics to track how the city is doing on this progress, independent of the provincial actions. Highlighting a couple of our great things that we have done on the corporate side. When it comes to buildings, we have the construction of the Community Pavilion and the East Side Library, which are 47% and 40% more energy efficient than code respectively. And we also have the adoption of our green building policy, first adopted in 2008 and most recently updated in 2022, excuse me. On the vehicle side, we have 18 electric or hybrid vehicles and counting, but we've also done a lot of work to increase the efficiency of our existing gas fleet, such as through the use of telematics equipment, right-sizing exercises, and the use of proper fleet management systems. On the corporate adaptation side, we have the creation of the Corporate Climate Change Adaptation Plan that was completed in 2019. Several of the initiatives within the city already embed adaptation within them, such as our stormwater management systems and also the way that we protect staff and residents. Moving on to the community of the city of Waterloo, and once again, starting with mitigation, we have very similar targets of an 80% reduction by 2050 as compared to 2010 levels. My colleagues just spoke about our Climate Action Waterloo Region Plan, which is our regional community greenhouse gas mitigation plan. We also have our Community Energy Investment Strategy, which is a strategy for transitioning to a clean, local, and equitable energy system. In terms of our community monitoring, we do a regional community-wide greenhouse gas monitoring every 5 years. And as Kira just mentioned, between 2010 and 2019, we saw a drop of 3.7% in our community emissions. A couple highlights on the community side are our active and public transportation. Last year, we completed the Larch Street Woonerf, and we have such a large plethora of resources available for cyclists, including over 150 kilometers of trails, and we were the first mid-sized city to be awarded the bike-friendly gold standard. On the waste reduction side, one of my personal favorite examples is our poop power. We have collected enough dog waste to power 400 homes for about a month, which is pretty impressive. We also have a really strong internal culture here at the city of waste reduction. And that picture right there in the center is actually from our last election. So we had all these leftover election supplies, and instead of just recycling them or throwing them out, they were distributed to staff who asked for them. The City of Waterloo supports a thriving local food system in several different ways. We have 7 different community gardens in 6 different locations, and several of those serve areas where there is a high population of equity-deserving neighbors. We also had a really interesting program during the pandemic. So in 2020, during the worst of the pandemic, the city provided 100 at-home garden kits, which was both a means of improving the mental health of residents, but also providing low-cost food. And those 100 kits were gone within an hour of the program being open. Moving on to sustainable economic development, we of course have our Generation to Park development, but we also have smaller initiatives, such as the Small Business Center, which provides SDG workshops, Sustainable Development Goal workshops to small businesses. I had the opportunity to go to one on climate last week, and it was fantastic to see. The City of Waterloo also funded the feasibility study for the Evolve 1 building, which is Canada's first net zero building and is now net positive, I believe. On the community adaptation side, our goals are to create resilient communities and protect our environment, and we do that through several ways. We have some really fantastic resident programs, including our backyard and community tree planting programs, our Partners in Park stewardship programs, and we are a Bee City with a pollinator working group. A couple of things that are upcoming include our urban forest management strategy, as well as the Laurel Greenway feasibility study. And of course, I cannot do a presentation this close to after Earth Week without mentioning our Earth Day community cleanup, which just happened this week. I have been told over 1,100 people signed up to clean over 60 spots in the city, which is absolutely fantastic. Moving in terms of how we promote resilient and adaptive communities, there are so many examples, but this is one of my favorites, is the upcoming Waterloo Square and Waters feature, which is such a great example of how we can combine arts and culture and public spaces and community adaptation to create a place that is protected from the urban heat island effect. And this slide has so many other examples. Just for the sake of time, I want to focus on one of them, which is the Vista Hills water collection system. This is a system in that community that collects clean rainwater from the roofs and infiltrates it directly into the ground to reduce overland flooding, and it is only the second system of that size to be implemented in Ontario. Now, of course, none of this would be possible without the financing to back it up. This here is the highlight of all the climate change specific items in the last 2023 budget. All of this, of course, helps us move forward and work and take advantage of the momentum of this work. However, I think we can all admit that it won't necessarily be enough, and we need different funding mechanisms and more funding to make this work possible. And this is something that we cannot do alone as a municipality. We will need help from different levels of government and different levels of advocacy as well. I wanted to make a quick note on the measurement and reporting. So we actually do have several different measurement and reporting avenues for this type of work. I shouldn't say the big one, but what I think is the big one is this report, which will be coming out annually and reviewing what we have done in the last year. But we report from the municipal level all the way to the international level with ISO standards. In terms of next steps, in this coming year, we have the completion of the Corporate Climate Change Action Plan. We also have the formalization of several different internal funding structures and decision-making structures, and we're looking at how we can implement sustainability and climate change really throughout the entire city. We are currently updating the city's environment website to be more focused on the work that we are currently doing, and next year we will be providing a 5-year update on the Corporate Climate Change Adaptation Plan. I wanted to say thank you, and before I let go and answer any questions, I wanted to make a quick note that if anyone wanted to see any of our sustainability initiatives in person today, as you head out of this building into the lobby right before the front doors, I encourage you all to look up, because we have solar panels that we installed 20 years ago in 2003 there that are still operating today and still offsetting the energy needs of this building. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Anna, for that presentation and for an excellent report. It's really great to, I know you've been here, I think about maybe not quite a year, so a lot of work that you've done, and you've consolidated work that staff have done over the past years, and thanks to Sandy Little, who also was carrying this before we were able to secure you, Anna, so thank you again for that. So questions from council? No, seeing no questions from council. Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Bassett.
Yeah, no, this is great, and what a great presentation. Super engaging. Thank you. Yeah, well, I had asked you this question before, and I thought you gave a really good answer, or interesting answer. Well, it was good too. Sometimes people say things are interesting when, they think it's weird or whatever. So I wanted to get a sense when I asked you about the private sector versus public sector, and who is maybe better positioned to take risks, and why or why not. So, and why I ask that is basically to understand when opportunities come our way, who should we be looking to really take the most bold action, and what's our role, what's the private sector role?
Thank you. Through the mayor to the councillor. Yes, thank you for asking that question again in a room full of people. No, that's a really fantastic question. And I believe at the time I had mentioned that while the private sector does definitely have the advantage in terms of the amazing technology they can try out and different things like that, they do not have the responsibility to have people's best interest in heart as a government does. So I think the answer is really that there has to be a mix between municipal governments, of course, keeping the safety in mind of people, as well as all the different aspects that we have to consider. And this was something that I'd noted when Kira had talked, actually. When we are saying, what do we need to focus on next, for example, climate change cannot be viewed in the context of a bubble, and I think that's a really important message to get across. So you cannot necessarily push climate action forward without also considering equity, for example, without considering planning, without considering all these other things the city is responsible for. And I think that's where municipalities really shine, and where municipalities have the responsibility to make sure that our work is done in tandem with the best interest of everyone and the best interest of the future.
Yeah, thanks so much. And what really struck me about that was why. Another reason I think that came to mind is because last week we were talking about Parkview, the crematorium, and there's lots of private sector options, but we're also a public sector option. And so I thought, does that give us up in thinking about that conversation, if it ever comes again down the road? It made me wonder, like, what opportunities should we be taking as a crematorium to advance further the environmental impact of death? And then the same thing, because when we look at the WMRC and the reduction and the renovation, because basically your answer is, well, a private sector wouldn't necessarily be thinking about the public good. They may, but that's not always what reins people in. So are there other private facilities that are doing the same thing that we were able to do, or morally obligated or pushed to do with the WMRC, which is 47% reduction? So I guess it's just a general conversation I think we need to be thinking of, because where the private sector might be able to do something really risky, what is that interplay between us? And it seems like such an important conversation, as the sort of private sector seems to be like gaining a hold on everything right now, and we're still trying to maintain public good. So anyways, those are just my random thoughts based on your thoughts, and I appreciate them very much. Thank you.
Go ahead, Sandy. Wanted to respond to
Yes.
Councillor Bassett.
That would be great. Thanks. Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Vasic. It's a really great comment to make in terms of, what is our role? Where do we kind of focus in on things? And I think there's a few different answers to that question. One being direction, obviously, from council, and we're getting that through our strategic plan. So I have to put a plug in for that. I think as well, in terms of our current approved plans and strategies, kind of what are the actions? What are the recommendations that we already have and that we're going to be moving forward with as part of our corporate climate action plan? And then the other piece of that is, how do we prioritize, right? There's so many amazing, innovative actions coming forward in the private sector. How do we prioritize in terms of where do we kind of focus our attention? Where do we focus our work? And that's the real question, right? Is how do we go about doing that? And I think the main kind of underlying kind of tone of both of these presentations is we can't do it alone, right? We recognize there is a role to play, but I think very much as we move through with implementing Transform and more people are coming to the table, and as we move forward with our own corporate climate action plan, it provides that kind of framework so that we can make those recommendations based on what we're seeing and where we can kind of focus in that energy. And then just really quickly, lastly, I know the mayor mentioned this, but to see a whole row of sustainability and climate change professionals in council chambers is pretty awesome. And this is the team that will help us, right? We don't do it alone. If someone approaches us, we will often reach out to Kira or to Tova or to Matthew to be like, have you heard about this? What are you hearing? How are we approaching this? So it's really a collaborative effort rather than us evaluating things on our own.
Thank you for that, Sandy. Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, I just have two questions, and they're maybe a little bit unrelated. So one of them is a follow-up to Councillor Vasic's comments about the role of private sector, but in a slightly different way. So what I'm interested in is we've heard a lot about mitigation and our need to, curve or bend the curve on emissions, because emissions avoided are the gold standard. But we also obviously have to pay a lot of attention to adaptation and drawdown, because those climate change is here. So in that context, I was just thinking about the sort of shared aspect of certain parts of infrastructure and natural assets. So, and an example of shared infrastructure might be our stormwater system, where the source point is runoff from, in many cases, private homes or commercial businesses. And so it's taking a holistic approach and thinking about, where the private meets the public, and figuring out how to incent that private participation. And in the same context, in terms of the drawdown, I was thinking about, you said that the corporate emissions were reduced by 1,182 tons, I think, approximately. And it takes 50 trees a year to draw down 1 ton of carbon. So thinking about our tree canopy then, we have this strategy coming forward, hopefully in the months to come, but that natural asset is both a public and a private asset. So we obviously have our own public tree inventory, but then what do we do about the tree inventory that's actually on private land? So I just want to put that out as something that I hope we can be considerate of as we're working towards this corporate climate action plan. And then the second point had to do, I've lost it. Thanks.
Did you want to respond, Anna? And maybe Councillor Wright will remember her second point. We'll give her a minute.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Through the Mayor to the Councillor. No, that is a fantastic point, and I think another councillor had mentioned something really similar. And in my view, and I know holistic is a little bit of a buzzword, but in my view, the solution is holistic, and it requires it to be hit from so many different angles. I kind of think of it as a stain that you kind of have to hit from all different targets. So it is not just about a top-down government approach. It is, how do we incentivize people? How do we have behavioral changes? How do we get people to want to do this on their own property? But then at the same time is, how do we work with the businesses? How do we make sure that we are creating an environment for these things to go the way that we want them to go? And there has been quite a lot of work on the behavioral side that we have been discussing, because municipalities do control about 45 to 50% of emissions directly, but everything else is controlled by residents and businesses. So I think that there is a large amount of potential for us to work on that angle and do some research and see what we can do.
And do you remember your...
Thank
okay,
you.
go
That
ahead,
brought
Councillor
me.
Wright.
Thank you for that response, because it actually queued it all up for me again. So when I was looking at that, I mean, obviously we need new tools in the toolkit, right? And I know a lot of this stuff in the adaptation and drawdown space, these are things that are just, especially the modeling and the data tools are just coming now, which feels like, a little bit too late, but better late than never. But we really rely on our post-secondary institutions as partners in that work. And I just noted when I was going through Appendix B and C, they weren't there as a full community partner in those lists. And I just wondered, is this an opportunity for us to do more? Is it a case where we just haven't fully built those bridges? Or because I know the alignment is there, and certainly the alignment is all over their reporting as well. So I just wanted to ask you about that.
Thank you. Through the Mayor to the Councillor. Yes, that's a fantastic question, and we have been done quite a lot of work in terms of trying to make those connections with the universities. Last year, we are part of University of Waterloo's Greenhouse program, which is looking at students doing this kind of social enterprise work. We also work with I apologize, Sandy, I'm going to get this wrong, Laurier City Hub. Excellent, Waterloo City Log, and we are currently making connections with Conestoga as well. I think it's an absolutely fantastic point, and it's something we've been trying to make headway on. And I know we discussed it a little bit last week, especially in terms of all the amazing resources that are available, and how there's so much potential between that synergy. So it is something we're looking at. It's just it's people resources to go and say hi and have those meetings. So I'd be more than happy to chat offline later to make some of those connections if you have any suggestions.
Great, thank you so much. Councillor Rowe.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you so much. I have a question. I'm always interested in projects with measurable results. So I'm looking at the city dog waste collection units, and that there was enough electricity from the waste to power 400 homes for a month, which is really interesting. I'm asking this question because this project came up at the budget
in January. So I'm looking, like just considering forward, is there any projection if this is expanded through the city, this project, so what that could look like in terms of energy?
Through the mayor to the councillor. Thank you. That's a really good question. I unfortunately don't have that information offhand. I don't know if any of our senior leadership does, but if I think Mark might.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Rowe. Yeah, of course, as we get more of those units, there's more opportunity to capture the end result, the energy that can be, the outcome from those locations. For us too, the aesthetics and the convenience all play part of that. But yeah, definitely an improvement opportunity there as we get more of those. Some are planned. That budget request accelerated that, but that'll be part of the work moving forward.
Great, thank you. It adds more information when it's time to consider that at the next budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Seeing no other questions from councillors, I'll just a couple quick questions for me. Where was it here? I'm having a Councillor Wright moment. No. I was I'm concerned that the chart about transportation indicated that our CO2 emissions have actually gone up.
That would be, sorry, through the mayor to the mayor. That would be our corporate greenhouse gas ones, correct?
I didn't note the slide in my notes, but
no worries at all. Yes, they have gone up slightly. I would, if that is all right, I would like to pass that question off to.
Yeah, I guess my question is, we have some electric. We're electrifying our fleet. Mm-hmm. We, had a high. We were there. Oh no, this was pre-COVID. So I'm just, there's the LRT. We're improving active transportation and things like that. I get that staff have to move around, and we have plows that need to clear roads and things like that. So just wondering. Why that went up rather than down.
I'm actually, if I can take a quick crack at this before I send it over, thank you. I do want to note the dates of this. So this is 2018 data. We are about to come out with our new energy conservation management plan, which will have our more recent data. Between 2011 and 2018, obviously the city grew, so we had to add more cars to the fleet and things like that. And a lot of the changes we've made in terms of electric vehicles have been more recent since that, because this is data that is from 5 years ago. So I don't know, because we haven't done we haven't done the inventory yet, but I do imagine that those numbers may be different now.
Okay, that's fair enough. Unless Councillor Ormston, you wanted to add anything, but yeah, I guess it is a bit out of date. So hopefully those numbers look significantly different. I don't know if that's your sense.
Yes, through you, Mayor. It's an excellent question, and in some years we may see variation from year to year depending on construction activity. You mentioned snow removal would be one example, and correspondingly we're looking at sort of, as our operations grow, sort of the expansion of the equipment and things that we use, which would have a net effect on emissions. So between electric vehicles, between reducing the amount of diesel fuel we use, looking at our contractors and others, we try to look at the whole fleet. And without getting into the details that Tracy Bell would have, for instance, we are looking at every opportunity. So electrifying vehicles in our facilities and in our parks and other places as well.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. And the other kind of concern I had with this was there's it indicated that about 54% of staff didn't know how their work connected directly to the climate change or environmental. So I assume that that's something that I know you've been here a year, and Sandy was carrying the file before you, but that is something that I just tell me about what's happening on that front so that staff do see. More, and I would say maybe council as well, to help us understand more what how our decisions or how their work that they do every day connects.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, for the question. Yes, this data did come before I got here and started to annoy everyone with my message of climate change. Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. We've been doing several things to get staff more engaged based on the results from that study. One thing is we've done a lot of direct divisional engagement. We created engagement material specifically for staff to give them a background on what's been happening. We are also engaging all of staff, not all of staff, but several members of staff as part of the Corporate Climate Action Plan. We also do now have a adaptation module that's all staff have to take when they join the city, and we are just completing a mitigation module that all staff will also have to take when they start to get new to the city. We have also discussed internally the best ways to spread this information throughout. So we are looking at the moment at a biannual newsletter to spread out to all staff, just to be the right frequency so that it's not too much. And then I would like to say that I do think there's been quite a lot of progress and a lot of, I don't have a synonym for progress. There has been a lot of progress in terms of the internal discussions we've been having too within our environmental sustainability team and all the other teams throughout the city. Since I started here almost a year ago to date, it's been a stark difference of people who are sending me things to review, people who are trying to start these conversations and start their projects and initiatives. So I really do think there's been some fantastic progress and a fantastic show of momentum in that regard.
Fantastic. Thank you. You're clearly having an impact in the year that you've been here, and hopefully that continues. So thank you very much, Anna, for the report and for the presentation and for answering the various questions. And we very much appreciate it, and appreciate the message from you and our climate change partners who are here today around collaboration and that holistic approach and the need to look at the systems-wide approach. And I guess personally, I would add the need to do it with a lot of urgency because as the report outlines, there is certainly more work to do. So thank you very much. And we look forward to I think you said biannual, but maybe you mean semi-annual reports.
Sorry, annual reports to council, biannual newsletters to staff.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So, council, there's 3 recommendations, and I just need a mover. Well, the staff report. So the first recommendation is that the staff report be approved. The second part of the recommendation is that council reaffirms the 2019 climate emergency that was attached to the report. And the third is that staff report back annually on the progress towards our corporate and community greenhouse gas reduction targets. So need a mover. Councillor Rowe will move that. Councillor Vasek will second it. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you so much. Okay, so continuing along on our climate change sustainability discussions this afternoon, we have the Harmonized Green Development Standards Phase 2 project launch. Staff, hello, nice to see you, Max Kerrigan, thank you, and a presentation by Matthew Day from Waterloo Region Community Energy. So I'll turn it over to you, Max, and welcome.
Thank you.
And if you need to, there's a button on the...
I'm just going to be here for a second. I'm going to pass it over to Matthew.
All right.
Thank you, Mayor, councillors, staff, and the public. I'm excited to introduce or give you an update on the development of harmonized green development standards across the region. My name is Max Kerrigan. I'm a planner and urban designer with the city, and I'm the city's representative on a subcommittee working, as I mentioned, with the townships and the other municipalities as well as utilities on the development of a green development standard that is used region-wide. We've pretty well completed phase 1 of developing of retaining a consultant to move forward into phase 2, which will actually be the exciting part of the development of the standards, where we will work together to come up with the document that will be our region-wide mandate with respect to what our expectations are when people are coming through development application processes, and just public awareness and knowledge, and moving towards just better built form across the region. And with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Matthew Day with Waterloo Community Energy, who's going to give you a much more substantial update on where we're at. So.
Thank you very much, Max. And Matthew, if you do need to, there you go. Move it.
Oh, we max out.
Oh, is that as high as it goes?
It's okay. I can speak loud.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome, Matthew. Just a brief aside, Matthew and I used to play basketball, sometimes against and sometimes with each other. So it's nice to see him. It's been a while, but nice to see you back and really looking forward to your report. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for your interest in this topic. So we'll talk about green development standards, but first a little bit about who we are, WR Community Energy. It's a partnership between the 4 utilities, the 3 cities, and the region of Waterloo. We put together the Community Energy Investment Strategy. It was passed by all councils in 2018, and we started our work in 2019. It's a 25-year strategy. And we've since broken it out into these 6 terms. So term 1 that just finished, we were understanding who we were as a team, as a collaborative, what are our strengths, where can we make the most impact. We released annual reports, and the final report of term 1 was the 3 pillars of the energy transition. You may have remembered to council that I sent a letter to you all letting you know that this is the outcome and this is how we see the energy transition moving forward. We're now entering term 2. I think for the next term of council, we will focus on low carbon heat. And we think that by the end of this term, we could be provincial leaders in the low carbon, measuring low carbon heat across the province. Here are our projects, our priority projects for term 2. So the 3 pillars of the energy transition are market integration, policy development, and infrastructure development. And we think that if we do each of these priorities for each of these pillars, we will meet our goal here of being leaders by 2025. So from a market perspective, we're focusing on net zero communities. From a policy perspective, we're focusing on green development standards. And then from an infrastructure perspective, we're focusing on low carbon heat. But for the sake of this presentation, we'll be talking about the policy bit, the green development standards. Here's how we're organized, WR Community Energy. We have a governance committee that consists of senior leaders from all of these 8 organizations you see at the bottom. The City of Waterloo rep is none other than Mr. Joel Carter, sitting right over there. Currently, I'm the only staff person, but we hope to hire an additional full-time person to help us actually roll out these green development standards and engage with community leaders such as Kay and her group and many of the other folks who are very passionate about this topic across the community. We do offer various recommendations and studies, and for that we typically partner with outside consultants and other forms of collaboration. In order to do the work itself, we have 4 working groups. And for the purpose of green development standards, we'll just focus on this one on the bottom left, the Land Use and Development Working Group. And that is the working group that Max sits on. Okay. So with that being said, what are green development standards? Well, 2 things really. So number 1, they are a critical planning tool, and they support community level energy, environment, and climate change design standards. But then the second thing is that they provide predictability and a level playing field for developers in our community. Now, the second really important thing to notice about green development standards is that they're also an intra-municipal effort to lead climate change across the province. So Waterloo Region, we're not the first community to do green development standards. We're standing on the backs of giants here, Toronto, Ottawa, Pickering, Whitby. They've been doing GDSs for a long time, quite successfully. There have been other communities who have tried different forms of green development standards that might not have yielded the results that we like. But as a result, we have a whole province to draw from here, and we'll be drawing on our best practices. The second thing to notice on this bit is that it provides predictability on climate action. We know, in fact, Anna mentioned it earlier, that municipalities control about 50% of our GHG emissions. This is an opportunity for us to take a stronger leadership role. And then in particular, with the province, the Ontario Building Code lagging behind the National Building Code, this is an opportunity for the different municipalities in Ontario to work together to accelerate the National Building Code to align with our community-focused climate targets. So what have we learned so far and what's next? As Max mentioned, we finished milestone 1 just at the end of this year. It was a partnership with the 3 cities, the region of Waterloo, and the 4 utilities. We looked at green development standards and said, is that something that we want to do in Waterloo region? And if so, how ambitious? do we want to be? And here are 3 conclusions. Number 1, green development standards are worth doing in Waterloo Region. Number 2, we want to work together with this. We want to work together on this important topic. And number 3, we want to be ambitious. As we said, there's many other communities who are doing green development standards, and we want to align with the most ambitious aspects of all of their targets. But we're excellent collaborators in our community. In particular, we have excellent relationships with our utilities, which is a tremendous asset that we should leverage as much as possible. And then additionally, as I mentioned, there's some excellent community groups on the townships. We also want to partner with our townships, and fortunately the townships have agreed that we can do this together. And if we do it in a harmonized way, we would be the first community in Ontario to have net zero green development standards applied to the rural townships. So that's what we've done so far. So what's next? We actually need to design these suckers. This is, as Meg said, this is the exciting bit. So for the next year or 2, we'll be consulting with our community at large and put together various drafts. And then if all goes according to plan, in 2 years, we'll come back with design green development standards that apply to our community with the support of our community as much as possible. The goal here is that these standards will lead to net zero by around 2032. That timeline is to be determined. And then the other important thing I'll just reiterate here is that we'll be designing these standards with all 7 municipalities in support. That's the objective. And again, we would be the first community in Ontario to do it in this harmonized way. Many counties and regions in the province have different standards, but their cities and townships have different standards. We would want a harmonized approach. So once that is done, then we'll start the implementation. The implementation of a green development standard just has these 4 things: a checklist and a manual to know what to do and how to do it. We'll require staff training. Our planners are overworked as it is. Planners are not energy experts. This will require a different skill set for them. We'll require to train our planners on what to do. And with that will come a support staff. And then additionally, we'll require some community education. And then once all that is said and done, and we have the green development standard up and running, assuming it fits for this council, then we'll need to monitor and review it on an ongoing basis. It's one thing to design a standard to be net zero, but how do we confirm that actually is built to that standard and commissioned to that standard moving forward? Additionally, our priorities will change over the years, and we expect, we'll have different variations of our green development standards every 3 or 4 years. So we will be setting up a green development standard advisory committee consisting of planners and developers and the like. And we will partner with our utilities to support this measurement and verification of these standards as well. So finally, I'll just end with these quick thoughts. So yes, as I said, cities control around 50% of our greenhouse gas emissions, and a green development standard is an excellent way for municipalities to take collective action on these emissions. Second, we're building off of work from other leaders in the province. And 3, Waterloo Region, we hope, will contribute to the provincial conversations around standards. And we'll do this by doing what we do best, collaboration, specifically around engaging our utilities, harmonizing our standards across the entire region, and 3, including rural townships. So that's everything for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Matthew, for that presentation. It was very informative. So turning to Councillor Councillor Bodley
Thank you,
to
Mayor
start
Dorothy.
off our questions. Apologies for that.
Matthew. Thanks, Matthew, for that presentation. Really appreciated it. I understand that, through you, Mayor. I understand that these things take a lot of time, and I appreciate all of the effort that's going into this and sort of herding the cats, everybody together to come to an ambitious green development standard is going to take time, and I appreciate that. But I guess my question is, the city of Waterloo is just recently committed to the municipal housing pledge, which says that we're going to be building 1,600 new homes next year, before these things take place, and then every year subsequent to that while these are in place. So is there anything, and this is maybe for you or maybe for staff, is there anything that we need to be thinking about urgently to be implementing in the interim until these things come forward to set the stage for the development community, or to advance these goals more quickly before these are in place?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Bodley. Just one thing to note is we do, through site plan review and through rezoning and OPA applications, the requirement for an energy study is often a request, which at least has the developer begin to think about these things and come up with a plan or at least a strategy. That depends on the scale of the application, but at least we have some mechanisms where we can at least have that conversation, but nothing formalized yet, unless Mr. Cotter wants to speak to that. I'm not sure.
Thank you, Mr. Cotter, for
Sorry to
joining
put you on the
us.
spot.
No, it's okay. Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Bodley. I would just add to, in addition to that, there is authority under the Municipal Act to pass bylaws relating to basically building from a green perspective, subject to the ability of the minister to establish regulations relating to the building code. So there's some rules that need to be followed, and we can work on those. But really, I think this effort is really focused on, as Matthew indicated, this harmonized approach. And really, I think if we want to see success, we need to properly take the time to engage the development industry and get their buy-in with respect to this process. They can offer their expertise in construction and design and development, and if we can get them on board, then we have a real opportunity of success with respect to these green development standards. And I think that's the approach that Matthew is suggesting, is working collaboratively together as municipalities, but equally with the development industry, because we need them to buy into this standard that we're going to adopt to ensure that we are moving in the right direction with respect to climate action.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up, if I can. I've heard the energy study piece sort of discussed periodically at some of the development applications that have come forward, and noting that this is not there's nothing sort of mandated out of this. It's something that we're requesting from developers. Can you guys maybe speak to, like, what is the general response that we're getting from the development community on this request? Are most of them doing it? Are most of them confused? Are they doing it just to check a box? What would the sense be?
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Bodley, the response is mixed, to be honest. But what I can say is, based on recent discussions with the architects that are designing many of these projects, they are now starting to turn their mind to more of these energy transition and green energy requirements earlier on in the design process. So even though it's not necessarily a requirement, the goal was to get the industry to start thinking about these items early on in the process. We often refer them to Matthew to lend some expertise or provide some inspiration in terms of things that they could do. And again, if that's sparking ideas and that's getting the industry to engage earlier on, then we're starting to make strides in the right direction.
If I could add to that, maybe the City of Waterloo should be celebrated for requiring those energy strategies. I think they're terrific. The quality of them that we are seeing, that I've seen so far, aren't up to where we want them to be in the future, but it is a great way to get started. There's been some that haven't been helpful, but some have been extremely helpful, and they provide some transparency, whether they know it or not, into the minds of developers and who these engineering firms are. It's often the case that I would speak with these engineering firms behind the scenes, and they know what they're delivering and what they're not delivering and what they could be delivered on. So it has provided a lot of educational opportunities, I think, for staff, certainly for me, and starting the conversations behind the scenes.
Thank you for that additional information, both Joel and Matthew. Other questions from Council? Councillor Vasek.
Thanks through you, Mayor McCabe. So my question was about the development industry. So I'm just wondering if you could go a little bit further. You obviously have already a sense of a pulse on the development community, but I'm curious if through this process there's a formal way you're engaging a broad spectrum of the community, not just those who you might have interacted with through the energy requirement.
Yeah, one of the most important things we can do right now, and what we can get started even before the official design happens. We already do lunch and learns, energy education lunch and learns we have different ones set up for architects, for private planning firms, for developers, for engineers. We will be adding green development standards to that slide deck. We partner with other aspects of the industry. So if we're speaking to planners, we partner with engineers. Or if we're speaking to engineers, we partner with planning firms, et cetera. So absolutely, engaging with the development industry is a top priority for us. It's often the case in other communities that after the GDS has been set up, then they engage with a building advisory committee for phase 2. We hope to engage them early on to develop it for phase 1.
Okay, thank you. And then, like at the city, do planners who are reviewing applications give information about this process? Like, and if so, what does that look like? If not, could we include that information through that process?
Through Chair to Councillor Vasic. Currently, we do have an environmental planner on staff who does review the submissions regarding the energy strategy. So there is some in-house expertise, but certainly as part of this process, there may be a representative that's used collectively across the region. This is one potential outcome or implementation strategy of reviewing submission materials to ensure that we have the expertise across the board. Does that answer your question?
Well, I think what I'm wondering is if, not so much do we have environmental expertise in the planning department, but if an applicant comes in and the city is reviewing their application, do we somehow tell them that the green development standards are being developed? And here is how we would suggest you provide your input, which we believe is important because we want buy-in to advance it as fast as possible. Not that you say that part, but I just want to know if there's an outreach and referral mechanism to Matthew or Waterloo Region Community Energy.
Certainly, through the chair to Councillor Vasic again. Joel, I'll let you speak in a sec. But even when things are in development, we will, give some sense that we are working towards sort of common goals and things are in development, and we certainly push people in the direction to start thinking of these matters, and we provide them any advice on where to potentially look, and experts such as Matthew who may be able to provide them a little bit more information and places to look online or what have you. And really part of this process is the development of a toolkit, right, where we're requiring developers or architects to create an energy strategy. They have no idea what that is, and they have a general sense, but they don't really know, are there experts who develop these in the municipality currently, and where do we look? And we don't necessarily know exactly where to look, but we can kind of steer them in the right direction. And it certainly also encourages private sector companies to look to maybe have in-house expertise in their offices moving forward. So it's really starting that dialogue, and hopefully across the board we have advocacy moving forward. But Joel.
Sure. Further to expand on Max's comment, I think we take every opportunity to have a dialogue with the industry on things that are upcoming, including green development standards. We certainly communicate through the home builder liaison group that we have and other venues as well. But equally, we take opportunities where the industry is doing something green building related and are inviting us to sites to review their work. It's a reciprocal relationship a little bit in terms of us going out on site and learning from them, and them learning from us equally in return. So we take those opportunities. We try and advance these initiatives, again, so they're not caught off guard, but also so that they can bring their expertise to the table. Because part of the challenges that we're discussing with developers these days is balancing affordability with opportunities to enhance buildings in terms of design, both aesthetically and with respect to green building elements.
Thanks.
Thank you, Joel, Max, and Matthew for that response. Did you have a follow-up or no? Okay. Other questions from council? Just one question from me, because most of my questions were already answered, or asked, sorry, and answered. You had mentioned that there's a number of other municipalities that have green development standards in place, although they're not harmonized like we're aiming for across the Waterloo region. So I'm just curious about the timeline because I feel, we need these standards in place kind of sooner rather than later. Like using what is already available from some other municipalities, like are there not, I'm just, I guess, partly wondering, like, what the 1 to 2 year timeline, what's involved with that? If we have some standards in place from other municipalities, like, are they useful for us? Is that a solid template to start? And mostly I'm just, we're building, there's a need for building and building quickly, and sort of to get these in place as soon as possible is really where my mind's at.
I think there's through you, Chair. I think there's a few answers to this. So number one, absolutely, we can build on others. In particular for us, I'm a big fan of Ottawa's Green Development Standard, so we will be starting with that as a template, and then we'll be modifying and localizing it specifically. It will not take us 2 years to design the GDS. It's been done so many times. We're not reinventing the wheel here. But as Joel mentioned earlier, this is a socialization exercise. What we learned, Toronto's been doing this for going on 20 years now. They put together their standard in 2002. They didn't begin to implement it until 2012 because they needed to give the time to the developers. There's time to develop the expertise and the design, give time to for the architects to know that they'll be expecting this moving forward. So we won't need 10 years in the same way that Toronto did, but we will need some time to socialize this idea. It's in the market signal that we're beginning to take this seriously.
So fair enough, but are the market signals not already kind of in place? I mean, if other municipalities are doing it, I'm just wondering, I guess, like, I absolutely support getting these standards in place and really like the idea of getting it harmonized. But I guess, is it cost, or is it like the socialization piece for the developers, architects, builders? What's the delay from that end then, in terms of them picking up these standards? If it's like this, Toronto's had them in place for years, other municipalities have them in place. So, like, is that not a strong enough market signal to have sent to the industry?
Yeah. So the theory is that these standards should be one building cycle ahead of time. So they can finish the project they're working on right now, but then the next time they build a building, it will need to meet these standards. That's the theory. If the community wants to move faster than that, I think I'm very supportive of that. I imagine the planning departments they get a lot of, I think, the brunt from the developers. So we might need to listen to our planning friends for the timeline.
Okay. I don't know if any of you wanted to comment on that. Okay, Joel.
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to yourself. With respect to the timeline, as Matthew has indicated, part of this is related to transitioning, right? So to build, for example, a high-rise building, it's usually 3 to 5 year lead time of acquiring land, working through design, getting financing, and moving through construction. So, if a developer is midway through design and standards change, that can be highly problematic. And we see this with planning amendments. We see it with building code amendments. So part of it is an attempt to get out ahead of it, educate people, give some signals as to what's coming. But we also know that there's dialogue at the provincial level as well about setting some kind of ground rules around some of these standards. So a little bit of it is wait and see. We think we can move forward and start to, as Matthew said, build on the work that others have done to start to frame out this. But we also need some guidance in terms of what modifications the province may enact here within the not too distant future related to the building code or other regulations associated to the code that might restrict a municipality's ability. So we don't want to go too far down a road and then find out, we were hoping to do this, but now we can't because of legislation. We have to pivot and churn. So there's a lot of pieces that are being juggled here. And the industry does take a little bit of time to kind of climatize or socialize to some of these concepts, right? So they're overall seeking some level of lead time, if you will.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess I think it was, I'm not sure if it was Anna or Kira who said, just if we miss this cycle with the amount of building that's going to happen, whether they're housing units or other buildings in the next few years, those buildings are in place for 25 to 30 years. So I just really hope that we don't miss the bulk of that cycle that's coming, because that would really be problematic for us, I think, as a community, and considering what the climate, like, that we're already a bit behind in our climate emissions reductions. So anything we can do to accelerate that would be obviously to the good. So any other questions from council? Seeing none, thank you so much, Matthew. Really appreciate this information and the work that you and your team are doing. And as I said before, it's great to have the sort of the whole environmental team that we collaborate and work with in the chamber at once. So, so good day for a Monday. So I will look for, there's a recommendation with this that the staff report harmonized green development standards, phase 2 project launch, Waterloo Region Community Energy be received for information. Need a mover with Councillor Hamner and a seconder with Councillor Bodley. All in favor? That is unanimously carried. Thank you so much for all of you for attending today and providing this information. It's really important and helpful. So next on the agenda is the 2023 General Tax Levy. There is no presentation with this, but there is a recommendation that Council approve the report and that we adopt the 2023 General Tax Levy attached in Appendix A to this report, and this would be our final municipal levy. Any questions on the report? Seeing none, do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Vasic is a mover and Councillor Roach is seconding that, so all in favor. That is unanimously carried. Thank you, Mary Zubert, for your report. Next on the agenda is the 2023 Business Improvement Area Levy. Again, another report by Mary Zubert. And there's 3 recommendations there. Do I have any questions? Yes? Oh, okay. Okay, I've got Councillor Wright is prepared to move it. Councillor, do you have a question? Okay, sorry. Councillor Vasic has a question about this report.
Yeah, Paul, could you tell me where the remaining $80,000 of operating funds will come from, if not from the levy?
Through you, Mayor, to the councillor, the levy accounts for, I think, most of the revenue, and the difference is other levels of government grants, including the City of Waterloo that is providing, I think, 20 grand of grant for the 2023 calendar year.
Perfect, thanks. That's it for me. Happy to second it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Vasic. So moved by Councillor Wright and seconded by Councillor Vasic. Sorry, Councillor Roach, did you have a question? No, okay. Seconded by Councillor Vasic. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. So moving on to the 2022 tax adjustments. Again, a report by Mary Zubert. And there is a recommendation that this report be received as information. Council, are there any questions? Seeing none, mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Bodley and seconded by Councillor Roach. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. And so our next item on the agenda is the University Avenue Gateway implementation authorization for signatures of agreements. This report was prepared by Rick Martins. There's three recommendations attached to this. Are there any questions from council? Seeing none, I just want to say that I'm really excited to see this project move forward, and thanks staff. And I know there's regional staff involved at this as well, but also, of course, our city staff and collaboration with Laurier in this case. I'm really excited to see this project move forward. So thank you very much for this. So mover and a seconder for this report, moved by Councillor Rowe, seconded by Councillor Vasic. All in favor? That is unanimous and carried. Okay, so consideration of notice of motion given at a previous meeting. There is none. There is a notice of motion. The notice of motion. I'll pause here and turn this over to Councillor Roach.
So I would ask council to waive notice of motion. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Vasek and Councillor Hamner. All in favor? Okay. So that's approved, and I'd ask Mayor to introduce the motion. I will ask the Mayor to introduce the motion.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Council. This was circulated earlier to you. This is Bill 5, Stopping Harassment and Abuse by Local Leaders. So I think a lot of this shouldn't really need explanation, but unfortunately, it appears to be the case that there is egregious behavior that continues to happen in the public sector, amongst council in other cities and municipalities, as well as in the private sector. So Bill 5, we were approached by MPP Stephen Blaise out of Ottawa, who has a private member's bill that he has introduced first in 2021 and then is reintroducing in this term for the provincial government, and hoping he's reached out to municipalities across the province. I think there's over probably 60 at this point that have passed this resolution, including last Thursday, the Ontario Big City Mayors approved this unanimously as well. So hopefully you've had time to read the bill. I would ask for your support and thank you in advance. And you're prepared to, I'll move it, and you're prepared to, sorry.
And can I have a seconder?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, yeah, to get it on the floor.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments?
Thank you. Sorry. Like, I haven't been doing this for 4 years and I still don't know the process. Yeah, I certainly support this, no doubt. But when I read it, my question was, what similar policies do they have at a provincial level for provincial representatives? And some of the most egregious behavior comes from provincial and federal representatives, both within the legislature and online. And so, yes, of course, we shouldn't have this harassment, but it is, and I don't know this individual, so I'm sure his behavior is entirely respectful, but I do find it slightly comical that they're asking us to do this when sometimes the behavior as we move up the political chain gets worse and worse and more embarrassing, frankly. So not that you need to have an answer to that, because I support this no matter what, but that's what came to mind. And so I don't even think I would want to do now for there be it resolved, please also act appropriately in public and private, but right, exactly. And so I just wanted to share that because that's what came up for me, and that's it. Thanks.
No, totally valid response or reaction to it, and I would say that it's a great opportunity for municipalities to show leadership and set this example for our provincial and federal cousins to take appropriate action themselves. And in fact, the Ontario Big City Mayors, when they discussed this on last Thursday, that is a whereas clause that they did add. I could pull it up, but but yeah, it was to say, and take a look at yourselves basically as well, because we know that this happens, unfortunately, at the other levels of government, but I think it's an opportunity for municipalities to show some leadership in this regard. And we do know that that we're going to be looking at our code of conduct shortly. And again, show some leadership, and we'll share that back with our provincial and federal friends and suggest they do likewise. Because you're right, it's a problem, unfortunately, still.
So motion put forward by Mayor McCabe and seconded by Councillor Vasek. May I have a show of hands? Okay. Carry unanimously. Carries.
Thank you, Councillor Roach. So communications and correspondence, there are none. Unfinished business, there's none. Do we have any questions from council? Any new business from council? Councillor Vasek?
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of litter cleanups. There are a couple that I wanted to, because I might not remember when they go back out and do it, that were postponed in the University Downs neighborhood, and then also neighbors who live in the Hillside area. So those have both been postponed, but many thanks to them for their ongoing work, not just on Earth Day for litter cleanup and stewarding the parks. Do you want to do ground up?
Sure, and I'll just add quickly that NOSEP had organized a cleanup for Brighton Park, which also coincided with the day of rainfall.
Sorry,
which
who did you say that is?
The organization NOSEP.
Okay.
So that's a Ward 7 resident who has a social enterprise. She's also just recently passed her dissertation for her master's at University of Waterloo. And so she had planned to clean up for Brighton Park. That's been postponed to BD. And then Councillor Vasek and I participated in Ground Up Waterloo Region's Earth Day community bike ride. It was great fun. We toured a bunch of very, very cool civic activities, from community gardens to food forests. We gathered in both the public square in Waterloo and City of Kitchener. And it was an all ages ride. It was fantastic, even though it was very cold and we had to drink a lot of tea afterwards.
Well, thank you both for participating in that ride. Go ahead, Councillor Rowe.
Through you, Mayor, I just wanted to add that I stopped by Waterloo Park when they did their community cleanup, and it was torrential rain. They had 18 volunteers out, though, and they really did a great job. So I commend the volunteers, the organizers, and everyone who came out. So that was really great. And I wanted to add too, I don't have all the information, but I did want to add that St. David Celtics, the team Dave, the robotics team, has been in Houston for the past few days competing for the World Championships. I don't have social media here. I don't carry my phone that, has that. So I don't know what the outcome is. Someone else may know that, but I did want to mention that they have been participating for the past several days in Houston.
It says, so yesterday they said Team Dave earned a spot in the First Robotics Team's World Championship playoffs, competing and cooperating through 4 rounds. They finished the year 51-15. I don't know if that means 51 wins, and I don't know what 51-15 means, but if anyone else does, jump in. But they're competing in the top division. So, yeah. It's really impressive. It's really impressive if you haven't seen the robot that they built and what it can do. It's incredible. So, yeah, kudos to them. Sorry, go on, Mary Lou.
You covered it. We were at the evening at St. David's prior to them going to the States to see the robot, and it really is fantastic. And I know that the students that participate are really committed and incredibly talented. So, good for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Other new business by anyone? Councillor Wright.
Thanks. Mayor, I just wanted to share that the U13 team, basketball team from the Phoenix, they took their Division 1 title. Yeah, so the girls are kicking butt.
The Resurrection Phoenix? No, the Phoenix. Oh, okay, yeah. Fantastic. Oh, great for sharing that.
KW Basketball Association.
Oh, okay. I'm a little bit out of my basketball since my kids stopped.
You're going to have to do basketball remedial now.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Good for them. Well done. Well done. Basketball is the best sport. I'll be, I know I have two chairs of the presidents of the hockey associations here, but anyway, thank you for that. Any other new business, councillors? Okay, seeing none, then the enactment of the bylaws. I need a mover and a seconder to enact the variety of bylaws that are listed there. Moved by Councillor Rowe and seconded by Councillor Hamner. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. A motion to adjourn. Councillor Bodley, seconded by Councillor Vasek. Thank you very much, Council and staff. All in favor? Thank you. Have a great rest of the afternoon.